Beatrice Sterling was no ordinary 7-year-old. She was a natural disaster disguised in designer clothes. Her father, Arthur Sterling, owned half of Manhattan's skyline, yet not even his fortune could buy his daughter's obedience. In just 6 months, she had broken 12 nannies. The city's top psychologists labeled her untreatable, insisting she needed a rotating army of specialists. But they were wrong. She didn't need credentials or control. She needed Riley, a waitress with $3 in her bank account and grease stains on her apron. That waitress would do the unthinkable, uncovering the dark truth hidden behind a billionaire's gates. The Tuesday lunch rush at the Silver Spoon was always brutal, but today the air felt heavier. Riley Miller wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand as she balanced a tray of lukewarm burgers. Her feet ached relentlessly. The soles of her sneakers had worn thin weeks ago, and every step on the tile reminded her how far behind she was on rent. At 26, Riley already carried the exhaustion of someone twice her age. She wasn't meant to be here. 3 years earlier, she had been halfway through a nursing degree before her mother's diagnosis wiped out their savings and forced Riley to trade textbooks for an apron. Table 4 needs a refill. Riley, move it, her manager Rick barked from the pass-through window. On it, she muttered, keeping her head down. Then the bell above the diner door rang. Not the usual cheerful ding, but something closer to a royal announcement. The chatter inside the diner faded instantly. A man stepped in who looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes. Arthur Sterling. Even Riley, who avoided the news, recognized him instantly, the sharp jawline, steel gray suit, and eyes that constantly measured the value of everything they touched. Today, though, he looked rattled. Dragging behind him by one leg of a pristine white doll was Beatrice, 7 years old, dressed in a Burberry coat worth more than Riley's car. Golden curls framed an angelic face, but her expression held nothing but cold, calculated malice. Trailing behind them was a frantic woman in a navy uniform, nanny number 12. Most likely, they slid into the corner booth. The best one. I don't want to be here, Beatrice declared. Her voice wasn't a whine, it was a flat statement of fact. Please, Arthur sighed, checking his watch. The chef at home is sick. We'll eat quickly, then I'll drop you at your lessons. Miss Gables will sit with you. I hate Miss Gables. She smells like wet dog, Beatrice said loudly. The nanny flinched. Arthur pinched the bridge of his nose. Just order, Beatrice. Riley approached with her notepad. She didn't force the fake smile she used on tourists. She was too tired. Coffee, black, 2 shots, Arthur said without looking up. And for the princes? Riley asked, glancing at the child. Beatrice shot her a glare. I want a chocolate milkshake. In a glass cup, not plastic. And if it's too thick, I'm pouring it on the floor. The diner went silent. All eyes turned. We only have plastic for kids, sweetie, Riley replied evenly. I am not a sweetie. I am a Sterling, Beatrice snapped. Bring me the glass. Arthur finally looked up, embarrassed. Can you just do it? I'll pay for the glass if she breaks it. Riley hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes later, she returned with the milkshake in a heavy glass sundae cup and placed it gently on the table. Beatrice studied it. Then she glanced at her father, absorbed in his phone, at the trembling nanny, and finally at Riley. Slowly, deliberately, Beatrice shoved the glass. It shattered against the tile. Chocolate sludge splashed over Riley's worn sneakers and soaked the hem of her jeans. The diner gasped. Beatrice! Arthur jumped to his feet. It was too thick, the girl said calmly, folding her arms. She stared at Riley with open defiance. Do something, yell, my dad will fire you. Riley didn't yell. She didn't grab a mop. She didn't apologize. Instead, she reached over, dragged an empty chair from the next table, the legs screeching loudly across the floor, and sat down directly across from Beatrice, ignoring Arthur entirely. What are you doing? Arthur asked, stunned. Riley locked eyes with the child. You made a mess, so? Beatrice sneered. Clean it up. That's your job. My job is to serve food, Riley said calmly, her voice razor steady. Not to clean up after healthy children who choose to act like toddlers. Gasps rippled through the diner. Riley pulled a rag from her apron and placed it on the table in front of Beatrice. "Clean it up." "Excuse me," Arthur cut in, his voice dropping. "I will pay for the cleaning. I'll pay for your shoes. Do not speak to my daughter like that." Riley turned slowly toward him. "Sir, with respect, your money is why she thinks she can throw glass at people. If you clean it, you teach her that her mess is your problem. If I clean it, I teach her that working people are disposable." She turned back to Beatrice. "Clean it up or I take your doll." Beatrice's eyes widened. "You can't touch my things. Watch me." Riley reached for the doll. Beatrice snatched it back, shrieking, "Daddy!" "Fire her?" Arthur looked from his daughter to the she caught something in Riley's eyes then. Not anger. Not fear. Just a deep, bone-tired resolve. The look of a woman who didn't care about his net worth or his power. "Daddy, Plum!" Beatrice screamed. Arthur didn't move. "Clean it up," he said calmly. The girl froze. The betrayal on her face was complete. She looked at Riley, who didn't blink. Shaking with rage, Beatrice snatched the rag and slid out of the booth. For 3 full minutes, the diner was silent except for her sniffles and the wet slap of cloth against tile. She did a terrible job, smearing chocolate everywhere, but she did it. When she stood, hands sticky and trembling, Riley nodded. "Good, now sit down." Riley rose, glanced at Arthur, and said, "I'll get the check." Then she walked away. 10 minutes later, after they were gone, Riley cleared the table. Under the napkin holder wasn't a cash tip. It was a business card-thick, heavy stock with embossed lettering. Arthur Sterling, CEO, Sterling Dynamics. On the back, written in fountain pen, "I don't know who you are, but I need you. Call this number tonight." Riley stared at the card for 3 hours after her shift ended. Her apartment was a shoebox in the decaying side of the city. The radiator hissed and clanked, louder than it was warm. On the counter sat a stack of medical bills from her mother's care facility, stamped overdue in aggressive red ink. She needed money. She didn't need complications, and the billionaire's family was the definition of one. But the number on the bills, $4,200, made the decision for her. She dialed, "Sterling Residence." A crisp male voice answered. "This is Riley Miller. Mr. Sterling asked me to call." "Hold, please." 30 seconds later, Arthur's voice came on the line. "You called? You left a card?" Riley said, leaning against her chipped counter. "Look, Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry about the scene today. If you're planning to sue the diner or get me fired..." "I want to hire you," Arthur cut in. "I'm a waitress, not a consultant. I have consultants, tutors, nannies, psychologists, behavioral therapists. I pay them millions, and Beatrice terrorizes all of them. Today was the first time in 3 years I've seen her listen to anyone." "She didn't listen," Riley corrected. She was shocked. "It won't work twice." "I'm willing to bet it will. Come to the estate tomorrow, 10 a.m. just to talk? I'll pay you $5,000 for the hour." Riley nearly dropped the phone. $5,000 covered the medical bills and the rent. "I'll be there," she whispered. The Sterling estate wasn't a home. It was a fortress. High iron gates. Cameras swiveling to track her battered Honda Civic as it climbed the winding drive. The house itself was a sprawling, Gothic Revival mansion looming beneath a gray sky. A butler opened the door. "Mr. Sterling is in the library." Inside, everything felt cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. Marble floors. Museum-quality statues. Silence so thick it pressed against her chest. Arthur stood by the window. Nearby, in a wingback chair, sat a woman who looked carved from ice. She wore a severe gray suit, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Miss Miller," Arthur said, turning. "Thank you for coming. This is Mrs. Agatha Harrington. She manages the household and Beatrice's schedule." Mrs. Harrington didn't stand. She scanned Riley from head to toe, her lip curling at Riley's thrift store blazer. "This is the waitress." "Nice to meet you too," Riley replied evenly. "Riley," Arthur said, stepping forward, "I'll be direct. Beatrice's mother died when she was 3. Since then, It's been difficult. I travel constantly. Mrs. Harrington manages the staff, but we can't keep a nanny. Beatrice attacks them physically. He cleared his throat. Emotionally. She destroys their belongings. She's a child, Riley said. She's acting out for attention. It's more than that, Mrs. Harrington interjected smoothly. The child is broken. We suspect a personality disorder. We need someone to contain her until she's old enough for boarding school in Switzerland next year. Riley felt a chill. Contain her. Like an animal. I'm offering you a position, Arthur said. Live in. You'll be her primary caretaker. Salary is $150,000 a year, plus bonuses. Riley's breath caught. Life-changing money? You'll have complete autonomy, Arthur continued. You don't answer to Mrs. Harrington on discipline. You answer only to me. Mrs. Harrington's eyes narrowed. She hated this. Can I meet her first? Riley asked. Before you say yes? Mrs. Harrington replied coolly. She's in the playroom. 3rd floor. East wing, good luck. The last one left bleeding. Riley climbed the grand staircase. The house felt like a museum, not a home. No family photos? No toys in the halls. Just sterile perfection. She reached the playroom door and pushed it open. It looked like a tornado had hit. Toys shattered. Books torn apart. Beatrice sat in the center of the wreckage, using scissors to snip the heads off a line of expensive Barbie dolls. She looked up. Recognition flashed, then hardened into a scowl. You, Beatrice sneered. My dad hired the waitress. That's pathetic. Riley didn't react. She crossed the room, kicked a headless Barbie aside, and dropped into a beanbag chair. She pulled a paperback from her pocket and began to read. Beatrice stared. What are you doing? You're supposed to tell me what to do, or play games with me, or ask about my feelings, Riley said flatly, turning the page of her book. But I'm not getting paid yet. So right now, I'm just hanging out. Beatrice rose from her chair. The scissors flashed in her small hand as she crossed the room. Get out! No! Beatrice snatched up a wooden block and hurled it. It sliced through the air, missing Riley's head by barely an inch. Riley didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. You missed, she said calmly. Beatrice let out a shrill, piercing scream of pure frustration. She grabbed a bottle of red paint from the art table, her hands shaking. I'm going to ruin your clothes. These are from Goodwill, Riley replied without looking up. They cost $4. Go ahead. Beatrice froze. The threat hadn't landed. The balance of power felt wrong. She dropped the paint bottle, breathing hard. Why aren't you scared of me? She whispered. Everyone's scared of me. Riley finally closed her book. She looked at the little girl, really looked. She noticed the dark circles under Beatrice's eyes, the faint tremor in her hands. Because I know a secret, Riley said gently. Beatrice stepped closer despite herself. What secret? I know you're not mean, Riley said. I think you're just lonely. And really, really tired. Beatrice's lip trembled. For a split second, the mask slipped, then the door creaked open. Mrs. Harrington stood there, watching. Instantly, Beatrice's face hardened. She threw the scissors to the floor. I hate her. Daddy, she hit me. Beatrice screamed toward the doorway. Riley turned. Mrs. Harrington was smiling, a thin, reptilian smile. I saw everything, Mrs. Harrington lied smoothly as Arthur came rushing up the stairs behind her. Mr. Sterling, this woman just threatened Beatrice. Arthur looked from Riley to Beatrice, then to Mrs. Harrington. Riley stood up. She knew how this ended. The wealthy protected their own. Staff back staff. She was about to be thrown out. She didn't hit me, a small voice said. The room froze. Beatrice stared at the floor, fists clenched. She didn't hit me, she just... Read a book? Mrs. Harrington's smile vanished. Beatrice, darling, you don't have to lie to protect her. I want her to stay, Beatrice said, lifting her chin and meeting her father's eyes. I want the waitress. Arthur released a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. He looked at Riley. You're hired. Can you start tonight? Riley glanced at Mrs. Harrington. The woman's eyes were cold, promising war. Riley then looked at Beatrice, a small, furious child swallowed by a massive house. "I'll go pack my bag," Riley said. She had no idea she'd just stepped onto a battlefield. The tantrums were only the surface. The real danger wasn't the 7-year-old. It was the secret hidden in the medicine cabinet. And the woman who held the keys. The first week at the Sterling mansion was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Riley expected screaming fits. What she got was silence. Beatrice didn't yell. She didn't throw things. She simply erased Riley. If Riley entered a room, Beatrice left. If Riley asked a question, Beatrice stared straight through her, as if she didn't exist. It was unsettling behavior for a 7-year-old. It was the behavior of someone who had learned that engagement only brought punishment. But the true enemy wasn't the child. It was Mrs. Harrington. Agatha Harrington ran the house like a military regime. Every minute of Beatrice's day was planned inside a color-coded binder. French at 8. Violin at 9. Etiquette at 11. The girl wasn't being raised. She was being programmed. "She's behind on her conjugations," Mrs. Harrington said on the third morning, handing Riley the schedule. "Ensure she studies during her free hour. No television. No toys." Riley took the binder, walked to the trash compactor in the gleaming kitchen, and dropped it in. Mrs. Harrington gasped, nearly dropping her tablet. "What do you think you're doing?" "Beatrice is 7, Riley said, pouring herself coffee. "She doesn't need to study conjugations in her free hour. She needs to play in the dirt. Mr. Sterling will hear about this insubordination." "Good," Riley shot back. "Tell him. Until he fires me, I'm in charge of the girl. You're in charge of the dust." The war had officially begun. That afternoon, the rain came down in sheets, turning the pristine gardens into thick mud. Beatrice sat in the solarium, staring out the window, trapped inside a stiff velvet dress. Riley walked in wearing jeans and an old hoodie. "Come on." Beatrice didn't look up. "Go away." "I'm going outside to jump in puddles," Riley said. "I need a partner." Beatrice stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "We're not allowed outside in the rain." "We'll get sick, Mrs. Harrington says." "Mrs. Harrington isn't here," Riley cut in. "And rain is just water. It dries." Riley grabbed 2 raincoats from the mudroom and tossed one over. Beatrice caught it on instinct. She hesitated. The fear of breaking rules was written all over her face. Then she looked at Riley, already opening the French doors, letting in the smell of wet earth and ozone. Beatrice followed. For 20 minutes, they weren't caretaker and child. They were 2 people escaping a prison. They stomped through the mud. Riley showed Beatrice how to find worms. Beatrice slipped and fell face first into a puddle, completely ruining her velvet dress. She froze, waiting for the yelling for the punishment. Riley just laughed. 10 points for style. 0 for landing. Beatrice blinked. Mud smeared across her eye as she wiped it away, and then something unexpected broke free from her throat. A rough, unfamiliar sound. A giggle. They trudged back into the kitchen, soaked, muddy, and shivering, laughing breathlessly until they saw who was waiting by the kitchen island. Arthur Sterling stood there beside Mrs. Harrington. Mrs. Harrington's expression was pure victory. "You see, sir," she said sharply, "I warned you. She's putting the child's health at risk. Just look at them, filthy." Arthur's gaze dropped to his daughter. He noticed the mud, the ruined dress. Beatrice's smile vanished. She shrank back, instinctively trying to hide behind Riley. "Daddy, she began, her voice shaking. "She's soaked through," Arthur said quietly, his tone dangerous. He turned to Riley. "What were you thinking?" "We were just playing," Riley said, stepping in front of Beatrice. "She has a fragile immune system," Mrs. Harrington cut in smoothly. "She was hospitalized with pneumonia last year. This is reckless." Arthur's face hardened. "Is that true?" "I didn't know about the pneumonia," Riley admitted. "But she's fine." We were outside for 20 minutes. "Take her upstairs and change her," Arthur snapped. "Then meet me in my study." Mrs. Harrington SMIRKED. Riley led Beatrice upstairs. The girl trembled not from the cold. "He's going to fire you," Beatrice whispered. "Everyone leaves when Agatha tells on them." "I'm not leaving," Riley promised, gently towel-drying her hair. "Now put on your warm pajamas. I'll handle your dad." Riley marched straight into the study without knocking. Arthur was pouring himself a drink. "You don't understand how delicate she is," he said. "Her mother died of a respiratory illness. I can't lose her." "You're losing her already," Riley said flatly. Arthur turned, glass clenched in his hand. "Excuse me?" "You're obsessed with her lungs," Riley continued. "You should be worried about her spirit. She's terrified of you. She thinks you hate her." "I give her everything," Arthur shouted, slamming the glass down. "This house, the best schools, the best clothes. You give her things," Riley said, stepping closer. "But you don't give her you. And you leave her alone with that woman." "Mrs. Harrington has served this family for 20 years, Arthur shot back. "She raised me." "Then she failed," Riley snapped. "Because you can't see the truth. Harrington doesn't care about Beatrice. She cares about control. She keeps her scared and isolated so she always be needed." Beatrice laughed today. She giggled. "Do you know how long it's been since she laughed?" Arthur went still. The anger drained from his face, replaced by exhaustion and grief. "I don't know how to talk to her," he admitted. "Every time I try, she screams or runs away." "Because she's medicated," Riley said. It was a guess, but one that had been growing stronger by the day. Arthur frowned. "She takes vitamins. A mild focus supplement. The doctor prescribed it. Who gives her the pills?" "Agatha." "Stop them," Riley said. "Just for 1 week. Let me handle her food. Her schedule. If she's not better in 7 days, I'll leave and you can sue me." Arthur studied her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the dried mud still clinging to her shoes. "1 week," he said at last. "But if she gets sick, you're finished." The grilled cheese rebellion marked the beginning of the change, but the war wasn't over. The next morning, Riley intercepted Mrs. Harrington outside Beatrice's room. The older woman carried a silver tray with juice and 2 small pink pills. "I'll take those," Riley said, blocking the doorway. Mrs. Harrington's eyes flashed with real hatred. "Those are her morning supplements. Mr. Sterling insists." "Actually, Mr. Sterling and I spoke," Riley replied. "No supplements for a week." Mrs. Harrington tightened her grip on the tray. "You foolish girl. Without those, she becomes unmanageable, violent, unstable. I'll take my chances." Riley grabbed the tray, walked into the bathroom, and flushed the pills down the toilet. Mrs. Harrington watched, her face a mask of frozen rage. "You will regret this." The first 2 days were brutal. Beatrice was restless, anxious, unable to sleep. She shattered a vase on Tuesday. She bit Riley's arm on Wednesday. Riley never shouted. She never locked Beatrice away. When Beatrice raged, Riley sat on the floor and waited. When she cried, Riley offered her arms. By Thursday, the fog lifted. Riley woke to the smell of burnt toast. She rushed downstairs to find Beatrice standing on a stool, reaching for the jam. "I'm hungry," Beatrice said softly. Her eyes were clear. The dark shadows beneath them were fading. "Let's make pancakes," Riley said. "But we do it my way, messy." For the first time, the house felt alive. Music blasted. Flour dusted the ceiling. Laughter echoed. And then Arthur walked in, dressed for a board meeting, phone in hand. He stopped cold. He smelled the pancakes, heard the music, saw his daughter not screaming, not withdrawn, but dancing with a spatula. "Daddy!" Beatrice shouted. She didn't run. She held up a lopsided, burnt pancake. "I made this. It looks like a monster." Arthur didn't move. Riley nudged him. "Eat the monster, Mr. Sterling." He took a bite of the raw, burnt batter, swallowed. "It's delicious." Beatrice beamed. It was the first time Riley had seen them truly connect, but from the doorway, watching the scene unfold, Mrs. Harrington stood perfectly still, her eyes not on Arthur. But on Beatrice. Her gaze locked onto Riley cold. Calculating, the look of a predator realizing its territory had been invaded. That night, Riley decided she couldn't wait any longer. She had to dig for the truth. She waited until the house fell silent. Until every light was out and every hallway empty, Mrs. Harrington kept a meticulous daily log in the pantry office, a narrow room tucked just off the kitchen. Riley slipped downstairs as the house creaked under the pressure of the wind. Using her phone as a flashlight, she eased into the pantry office. The door was unlocked. She searched the drawers carefully. Household expense ledgers, staff schedules. Then, buried deep inside a folder marked medical, she found what she'd been dreading. It wasn't a prescription pad. It was a receipt from an overseas pharmacy. Disoxin, haloperidol. Riley's nursing instincts kicked in instantly. Disoxin was pharmaceutical-grade methamphetamine. Haloperidol was a powerful antipsychotic. Used to sedate patients with severe schizophrenia, Mrs. Harrington wasn't giving Beatrice vitamins. She was drugging her uppers to make her volatile and aggressive during the day, downers to knock her unconscious at night. She was chemically engineering a behavioral disorder? But why? Riley dug deeper. A bank statement surfaced next. A joint account, Agatha Harrington and the Sterling Trust. There it was in black and white, a caregiver stipend clause. Special needs management, $20,000 monthly. If Beatrice improved, if she stabilized or transferred to a regular boarding school, Mrs. Harrington lost $20,000 a month. But if Beatrice remained unmanageable, Mrs. Harrington stayed indispensable and the money kept flowing. She was poisoning a child for a paycheck. Riley felt nauseous. Her hands trembled as she gathered the papers. Arthur had to see this. Immediately, she turned to leave. The light snapped on. Mrs. Harrington stood in the doorway. She wasn't dressed in her usual tailored suit. She wore a silk robe, and in her hand was a heavy brass candlestick. "I knew you were a rat," she said quietly. "Rats always sniff where they don't belong." "You're drugging her," Riley said, backing into the desk. "I have proof." "Arthur will destroy you." Mrs. Harrington smiled thinly. "Arthur believes what I tell him. He's a weak man still grieving his dead wife. I am the only stability he has." She stepped forward, lifting the candlestick. "You're going to hand over those papers. Then you'll pack your bags and leave. You'll steal some silver on your way out. That's the story, the thief waitress who ran away in the night." "I'm not leaving," Riley said, bracing herself. "Oh, I think you are." Mrs. Harrington lunged. Riley dodged, but not fast enough. The brass base slammed into her shoulder, sending a bolt of pain down her arm. She staggered, knocking over a stack of files. Suddenly, Mrs. Harrington screamed, "Help! Fire!" She dropped the candlestick, tore at her own robe, and raked her nails across her face. "What are you doing?" Riley gasped, changing the story. Mrs. Harrington hissed. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Security, Arthur, Riley was trapped. She clutched the papers to her chest. She had the truth, but she was just a waitress. Mrs. Harrington was the institution. The door burst open. 2 guards rushed in with guns drawn. Arthur followed, barefoot in his pajamas, panic written across his face. "She attacked me!" Mrs. Harrington screamed, collapsing to the floor and pointing at Riley. "I caught her stealing medical files." "She hit me." Arthur looked at Mrs. Harrington, blood on her face. Then at Riley, breathing hard, clutching documents, looking guilty as sin. "Riley?" Arthur asked, his voice cracking. "What did you do?" Riley met his eyes, the man she was starting to care for. She glanced at the papers in her hands. "I found the poison, Arthur," she said steadily. "I found out why your daughter is screaming." "Don't listen to her," Mrs. Harrington cried. "She's a junkie. Look at her eyes." Arthur stepped toward Riley. "Give me the papers." Riley held them out. But before Arthur could take them, Mrs. Harrington surged from the floor, not at Riley, but at the evidence. She snatched the papers with shocking speed and tore them in half. Then again, and again. Shredded paper fluttered through the air like confetti. "Take her away." Mrs. Harrington screamed. The guards grabbed Riley. No, Arthur! Check the pills. Check the bank accounts. She shouted as she was dragged from the room. Arthur stood frozen amid the scraps. He looked at the woman he had trusted for years, sobbing on the floor. Then he noticed a single fragment of paper resting on his slipper. He bent down and picked it up. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a receipt. He read the chemical name, haloperidol. Arthur said nothing. He didn't stop the guards. He simply folded the scrap and slipped it into his pocket. The war had moved from the nursery to the master bedroom, and Riley was gone. The holding cell at the 19th precinct reeked of stale coffee and hopelessness. Riley sat on the metal bench, arms wrapped around her knees. 6 hours had passed. No one had come. She had used her single phone call to beg the nursing home not to evict her mother if the payment was late. She closed her eyes and saw Beatrice's face, confused, betrayed. She thinks I abandoned her. That pain cut deeper than the handcuffs ever could. Back at the Sterling estate, the silence had returned. It was heavy. The silence in the room pressed down like a suffocating blanket. Beatrice sat alone in the center of her bedroom. The headless Barbies were gone. The room had been restored to perfection. Mrs. Harrington had cleaned everything while Beatrice slept. Time for your vitamins, darling, Mrs. Harrington could as she swept inside. Beatrice stared at the pink pills in her palm. I don't want them. Riley said they're bad. Riley was a thief, Mrs. Harrington replied, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She stole silver from the dining room. She never cared about you, Beatrice. She was only pretending, trying to get close to your father's money. You're lying. Beatrice screamed. Mrs. Harrington seized her by the jaw, fingers digging into soft skin. Her grip was merciless. Listen to me, you ungrateful little brat. She's gone. She's in jail. And if you don't take those pills, I'll make sure she stays there forever. Do you want that? Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. She shook her head weakly, then swallowed. Beatrice obeyed. The pills slid down her throat. The light behind her eyes slowly faded. The zombie was back downstairs inside the master study. Arthur Sterling wasn't sleeping. He wasn't working. He stood frozen beneath a magnifying lamp, staring at a scrap of paper. OPR ideal. Arthur picked up his phone and dialed a private number the family physician Mrs. Harrington had pushed out years ago. Dr. Evans, Arthur said, his voice hoarse. I need a toxicology screen. Not on me. On something I found in the trash. Arthur, it's 3 a.m, Evans said. Then paused. I'm coming over. Arthur drove himself. He didn't trust his driver. He didn't trust anyone. He handed Evans the torn half of a receipt and a small vial of clear liquid siphoned from the vitamin bottle. While Mrs. Harrington showered, the test took an hour when Dr. Evans returned. His face was ghost white. Arthur, this is a cocktail of antipsychotics and amphetamines. Chemical restraint. It mimics bipolar disorder and severe ADHD, and when it wears off, it causes paranoia and aggression. Arthur's stomach dropped. Who's taking it? Evans stared at him. Who? Beatrice. The clipboard slipped from Evans's hands. She's 7. This could cause permanent neurological damage. Who prescribed this? No one, Arthur whispered. Agatha did. Arthur rose slowly. Cold fury flooded his veins. He was a man who had destroyed corporations with a signature yet. He had allowed a viper to live in his home for 20 years. Call the police. Evans said. No, Arthur replied, fastening his coat. Not yet. She lawyer up? She claim I approved it. She has access to the trust. She vanished with millions. Then what are you going to do? Arthur's eyes hardened like steel. Tomorrow night is the charity gala. The press. The board. Agatha loves the spotlight. A thin smile formed. I'm going to give her a show she never forget. Then his face tightened. And the waitress. I need to get her out. The sun was rising when the heavy steel door of the holding cell swung open. Miller. You made bail, the guard grunted. Riley stood, stiff and sore, expecting to see a bail bondsman. Instead, she saw Arthur Sterling leaning against the wall, rumpled, exhausted, hollow-eyed. She froze. "Did you come to make sure I leave town?" Arthur crossed the room. Ignoring the stares, he dropped to his knees on the filthy linoleum floor. "Arthur?" Riley whispered, stunned. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't look. I didn't see. You were right about everything." Riley stared down at him. She noticed the scrap of paper clenched in his hand. "Is she okay?" she asked immediately. "Not am I fired?" "Not where's my money. She's alive," Arthur said as he stood. "But Agatha has her." "Riley, I have a plan, but I can't do it alone. Beatrice trusts you. I need you to come back. One last time." "She framed me," Riley said. "She'd do it again." "Not this time," Arthur promised. "This time, we're setting the trap." The annual Sterling Foundation Gala was the crown jewel of Manhattan's social season. The estate glittered beneath silk tents and crystal lights. Bentleys and Rolls-Royces lined the drive. Photographers packed the red carpet, flashes bursting like lightning inside. Mrs. Harrington thrived. She wore a black velvet gown worth more than Riley's childhood home. Commanding the staff with sharp gestures, "Mr. Sterling," she purred as Arthur descended the stairs in his tuxedo. "Everything is perfect. The senator is here. The press is asking for Beatrice. Is she ready?" Arthur asked, his expression unreadable. "She's a bit tired," Mrs. Harrington said smoothly. "I gave her a mild sedative for crowd anxiety. She be an angel." "Excellent," Arthur replied. "Bring her down in 20 minutes." Mrs. Harrington glided away, invincible. The waitress was gone. Arthur was obedient again. The money was safe. She entered the nursery. Beat at Rice sat on the bed in a frilly pink dress, staring at the wall. Her pupils were blown wide. Her body swayed slightly. "Up," Mrs. Harrington clapped. "Showtime, princess. Smile for the cameras." Her voice dropped. "And if you cry, I'll take your dolls forever." Beatrice nodded slowly, her movements heavy and delayed. Downstairs, the party was in full swing. Champagne flutes drifted through the crowd on silver trays, laughter rising and falling like music. Among the waiters, moving with practiced invisibility, was a woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun, dressed in a standard caterer's uniform. Riley kept her head lowered. A tray of crab cakes balanced in her hands as she moved through the guests. Listening, "Arthur looks terrible," one socialite whispered. "Well, you know about the daughter," another replied. "Unstable. Poor Agatha keeps that house running." Riley tightened her grip on the tray. She slipped toward the backstage area behind the podium, where Arthur stood adjusting his microphone. He saw her and gave a barely perceptible nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer boomed, "please welcome your host, Arthur Sterling." Applause thundered as Arthur stepped onto the stage. He scanned the sea of faces, the wealthy, the powerful, the blissfully oblivious. "Thank you," Arthur began. "Tonight is about the future, about protecting the innocent." He paused, then gestured toward the side of the stage. "And speaking of innocent." Mrs. Harrington emerged, holding Beatrix's hand. The crowd cooed instantly. "What a beautiful child." But as they stepped into the spotlight, Beatrix stumbled. Mrs. Harrington yanked her upright, her smile rigid and forced. "Wave, darling," she hissed through clenched teeth. Beatrix lifted her hand weakly. She stared at the blinding lights. Then the crowd. Her eyes were unfocused, terrified, dulled. "She looks unwell," someone murmured from the front row. Arthur remained at the podium longer than planned. Then he went off script. "I was told my daughter was sick," he said quietly. "I was told she was broken, that she needed discipline, medication." Mrs. Harrington stiffened, her eyes snapping toward him. "But recently," Arthur continued, his voice gaining strength, "I learned that sickness can be manufactured, and that monsters don't live under the bed. They live in the staff quarters." Mrs. Harrington's eyes went wide. She tried to pull Beatrix off stage. "Come along, dear. Daddy's making a joke." "Stay where you are, Agatha," Arthur commanded, The microphone screeched with feedback. The room fell into stunned silence. What is the meaning of this? Mrs. Harrington demanded, fighting to maintain her composure. He's drunk. Cut the feed. I'm not drunk, Arthur said evenly. And we're not cutting anything. He pointed behind him to the massive projection screen normally reserved for charity statistics. The screen flickered. Then a video began to play, grainy, black and white. Hidden camera footage Arthur had installed in the nursery the morning he bailed Riley out, on screen. Mrs. Harrington crushed pills into Beatrix's yogurt. The audio crackled. Eat it, you wretched girl. If you tell your father, I'll tell him you're crazy. No one believes a crazy child. The crowd gasped as one. The sound sucked the air from the room. Mrs. Harrington froze. She dropped Beatrix's hand as if it burned her. That's doctored. She screamed, her voice cracking. A deep fake. A deep fake? Arthur asked calmly. And the bank transfers? The skimming from the trust? The kickbacks from the overseas pharmacy? Mrs. Harrington looked around. The socialites stared back in horror. The illusion was collapsing. You ungrateful man. She shrieked, her mask gone. I raised you. I saved you. That girl is a demon. She needs medication or she destroys everything. She lunged for Beatrix, gripping the child's shoulders. Tell them. Tell them how bad you are. Beatrix whimpered, too weak to resist. Suddenly, a figure in a waiter's uniform sprinted from the wings. Riley hit Mrs. Harrington with the force of a linebacker. There was no elegance, only pure protective rage. She tackled the older woman, sending them crashing into the floral arrangements. Get off her! Riley shouted, pinning Mrs. Harrington to the floor. Security flooded the stage, but they didn't grab Riley. They grabbed Mrs. Harrington. Arthur ran to his daughter and scooped Beatrix into his arms. She trembled, crying silently. I've got you, Arthur whispered into her hair, breaking down. I've got you, Bea. She can't hurt you anymore. Riley rose to her feet, brushing rose petals from her uniform, chest heaving. The entire room stared at her, the waitress who had just tackled the head of the household. On live television, Mrs. Harrington was dragged away. Screaming obscenities, kicking at the guards, the silence that followed was heavy. Arthur stood holding his daughter. He looked at the crowd. Then at Riley. He walked back to the microphone. Beatrix still in his arms. Everyone leave, Arthur said. But the dinner, Adona began. Leave, Arthur roared. Get out of my house. The guests scrambled. Within minutes, the ballroom was empty, only Arthur. Beatrix and Riley remained. Standing among abandoned gala tables, Beatrix lifted her head from her father's shoulder and looked at Riley. Her eyes were groggy. But recognition flickered through. Riley, she whispered. Did you beat the witch? Riley smiled through streaming tears. Yeah, kid. I beat the witch. Beatrix reached out her arms. Riley stepped forward and took her. The little girl buried her face in Riley's neck and, for the first time in years, let go, she sobbed, not a tantrum, just raw, aching relief. Arthur watched them. He knew the war had been won. But the healing had only just begun. Snow fell softly over Manhattan, wrapping the city in a quiet white blanket. 6 months had passed since the night of the gala. The night tabloids called the red carpet reckoning. The Sterling estate no longer looked like a fortress. A lopsided snowman stood in the front yard, wearing one of Arthur Sterling's expensive silk scarves. The windows, once sealed behind heavy blackout curtains, were now open to the winter light. Inside, the silence was gone. In the kitchen, flour was everywhere. Riley was teaching Beatrice how to make pizza dough. Beatrice, now healthy, glowing, her cheeks rosy and a little weight finally back on her frame, laughed as she flung a lump of dough at the wall. It stuck, she shouted triumphantly. Arthur sat at the kitchen island. No suit, no boardroom armor, just a cable-knit sweater and jeans. A book on child psychology lay open in his hands, but he wasn't really reading. He was watching the two most important people in his life. Recovery hadn't been easy. The first month after the gala had been brutal. Beatrice went through withdrawal. Nights filled with screaming, shaking, and terrifying visions of Mrs. Harrington crawling through the vents. Riley never left her side. She dragged a cot into Beatrice's room. She held her hand through the fevers. She sang lullabies until her voice cracked. Arthur canceled every business trip. For the first time in his life, he learned how to be a father guided by a waitress, who understood love far better than he ever understood stocks. Justice came quickly. The investigation revealed that Agatha Harrington had been siphoning millions from the Sterling Trust for more than a decade. The chemical restraint of a minor added a list of charges so severe that she would die behind federal bars. The so-called untreatable child had never been broken. She had been poisoned. Hey. Riley wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at Arthur. Earth to CEO, you're staring. Arthur smiled. I'm admiring. He stood and joined them. Something had shifted. Riley wasn't just an employee anymore. Technically, she was still on payroll, but those lines had faded long ago. I have a surprise, Arthur said. Go get changed. Fancy but comfortable. Where are we going? Beatrice asked, eyes wide. Is it a party? Better, Arthur replied. An hour later, the black SUV pulled up to a familiar place. A neon sign buzzed softly in the twilight. The Silver Spoon Diner, Riley gasped. Arthur, why are we here? We have unfinished business, he said. Inside, the diner buzzed with life. Rick, the manager who used to shout at Riley, looked up. His jaw dropped as he watched the billionaire hold the door open for his former waitress. They slid into the corner booth. The same booth where everything had started. Beatrice climbed in, no doll this time, only a confidence she'd never had before. Riley? Beatrice asked. Yeah, kid? I want a chocolate milkshake. In a glass cup. Riley grinned. You got it? When the milkshake arrived, Beatrice stared at the glass. Then she glanced at Riley. With a mischievous sparkle, she pretended to shove it off the table. Arthur flinched. Riley didn't. Beatrice burst out laughing and took a sip. Just kidding, Dad, relax. Arthur exhaled, shaking his head. You two are going to kill me. Then he reached into his pocket. The energy at the table changed. He pulled out a small velvet box. Riley froze. The noise of the diner seemed to fade away. Riley? Arthur said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. You saved my daughter. You saved me. You walked into a house full of monsters and never blinked. You're not a waitress to us. You're the anchor. He opened the box. Inside wasn't an absurd diamond. It was a simple sapphire deep blue, like the dress Beatrice wore on the first day she truly smiled. I don't want a nanny, Arthur said. And I don't want an employee. I want a partner. I want a mother for her. Will you marry us? Riley looked at the ring, then at Beatrice, who was bouncing in her seat. Say yes, say yes. We practiced this in the car. Riley laughed through tears. She looked at the man who had learned how to love again, and the little girl who had learned how to live again. Clear his throat. Yes, Riley whispered. I'll marry you. The diner exploded in applause. Rick clapped the loudest. Beatrice cheered and wrapped her arms around them both. Does this mean I get a brother? She shouted. Arthur and Riley blushed. Let's finish the milkshake first. Riley laughed as they sat there, a family forged by fire. Riley looked out the window. She remembered the $3 in her bank account the day she met them. The stains on her apron. How people dismissed her as just a waitress. And she understood something then. Titles never mattered. Nannies, tutors, and specialists had failed because they treated Beatrice like a task. Riley succeeded because she treated her like a human being. Love, it turned out, was the only qualification that mattered. And that is how Riley Miller went from serving tables to saving a life, proving that you don't need a PhD or $1 million salary to change the world. Sometimes all you need is the courage to listen when everyone else is shouting. Arthur and Riley were married 3 months later in a quiet garden ceremony, with Beatrice as the flower girl. Together, they founded an organization dedicated to helping children misdiagnosed with behavioral disorders, so no child would ever suffer in silence again. If this story touched your heart, or if you believe kindness can defeat even the darkest secrets, Please hit that like button, it truly helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that heroes often come from the most unexpected places. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.